When I saw the film Dr. Zhivago, I must have been about 11 or 12. I remember thinking, wow, this is this is really hard to follow and understand what's going on. Over the holiday weekend, I had time to look up the film Dr. Zhivago to read, like to find out what was going on. And the review of the David Lean 1965 film started off by saying that Dr. Zhivago is an uneven work that's difficult to follow or understand. I felt I felt somewhat vindicated in that, but as I read the review, and I do love reviews or reviews of any work because in a review you get the idea of the work, and they also get the ideas of the person reviewing the work. But in the review, it talked about how it's the story. Dr. Zhivago is a story of individual people's lives and against the backdrop of history, and they said that the individual lives and history are not necessarily intertwined or engaged, but they're enmeshed. They're enmeshed together. And through the individual people's lives, we see the story of history. And through the story of history, we see the people's individual lives. They're enmeshed together. Welcome to Illinois Bridging Awareness. I'm Stanley Smith, and for whatever reason, we found ourselves enmeshed together in Illinois Bridging Awareness. And each week, we talk about a different topic and different concept on the Saturday call, and some of the truths and topics we've explored and truths that we've uncovered are the idea that not everything that a truth teller or a prophet tells us or prophesizes about is necessarily true. And probably more importantly, conversely, that not everything that the people we disagree with is false. We've also talked about the idea that if we're seeing ourselves in a dark time, it's possible that the reason we're seeing it that way is because we're being called to be the light in the dark time. Both Anya Gramone and Jim Downs on the call have shared the idea in different ways and illustrated it in different terms. The idea that we have our small conscious selves amidst our larger super conscious selves, and the small conscious self is the idea of our facts and beliefs and notions of things, but our larger superconscious self is the realm of the imagination and dreams and conspiracy. I've been trying to couch the term conspiracy in the realm of imagination and dreams, which is what it is. But we don't hear a lot about the American dream or individual dreams or imagining better things. It's all been consolidated and maligned under the term of conspiracy. Last year, I attended the University of Chicago uh, lecture series on phenomenology, and they talked about conspiracy and fringe thought. And the commentator said that all innovation and invention and advancements usually start as fringe thought. This is a real anthropological, philosophical study in academia, and they do not malign fringe. They see it as a useful and necessary step for fueling the realm of imagination and dreaming, this larger superconscious self. So that's what we're trying to bridge here, I believe, in Illinois Bridging Awareness, is the bridging this gap between our homeostatic state, our comfortable place, our safe place of our ideas and facts and figures, what we know makes us feel comfortable and secure, whether we're happy or frustrated or sad. We sometimes choose to be in this spot and cut ourselves off from this larger arena. So I think that's what we're providing as a bridge. If you want to stay, I don't want to say stuck, but in this spot, then that's fine. But if you want to just venture out a little further, then we're trying to provide a bridge here each week on a Saturday call for us to explore. I think we're digging down each week further and further. Um, Enneagramon also shared the idea that we have our three states of response to fear and anxiety, and that's the fight, flight, or shutdown. And she did explain that the fear and anxiety exist in the gap between our small conscious selves and our larger superconscious selves. That that's where fear and anxiety can manifest if we see that as a threatening situation. I like to think it also can be the source of joy, uh, can also result, but there's different responses people have. This last week on a Saturday call, the topic was who who are we? Do any of us really know who we are? We checked in and we discovered who we are. You know, if we met ourselves at a cocktail party, would we even recognize ourselves, and would we be somebody we'd be interested in talking to? Also related to the who we are was the idea of our script versus our role. We all have a script, and we all have a role. I guess I was thinking the role was more your role, your sole purpose. And your script is probably the details of your everyday living. People on the call shared their profession, their identity as a wife and a mother, as a caregiver, as a nurse, as a teacher, as a tutor. And then we talked a little bit more about, you know, what's fulfilling in those, in following those scripts, and the fulfillment can be fulfilling your role purpose of finding joy and fulfillment in filling up and fulfilling those those duties and following those scripts. So that was interesting, but surprisingly, we moved on very quickly to the idea of who we are as a group. Of all the little individual Zoom squares, who are we collectively? And it was pretty easy to discern that we're most of us are 55 or older, and we're all white, and we're in the same socioeconomic strata. I think we could loosely define that as middle class, even though the bottom of the middle class seems to continually keep falling out. I think we're still, we would safely self-identify as middle class. Um, and within that, we thought about, well, how is it that we all found ourselves here at this time? I think we all agreed, we all have heard the alarm. We've all heard the alarm in this time. And then again, the idea of the history versus our personal lives. Are we hearing the alarm solely because of history and the alarming facts that have and events that have taken place? Or are we hearing the alarm just because of our own physiological demographic background of who we are and where we are in our particular lives together as 55 or older white middle class people? Is that what primed us for hearing the alarm? Were we going to hear this alarm anyway? And the circumstances of life just primed us to hear the alarm that we needed to hear. Jim Downs on the call shared that in the 1960s, many young people heard an alarm in their time and place through the events of history, and they picked up the anti-war banner, and that might have been their time to hear the alarm. So many of us express frustration that more people are not waking up, and we wonder why that is. And that could be the answer. Maybe they're not ready in their development wherever they are in their life cycle. They're not primed to hear the alarm. So that's something to consider. Jim Downs shared the idea of being selfish versus selfishness, and he said that um, selflessness is a sign of maturity. There are young people who act uh, without being selfish, but in theory, younger people have, and all of us had, more needs, and that doesn't necessarily lend itself so well to being selfishness, because we have to be somewhat selfish to survive. But as we move through life and our needs are fulfilled, we move into an area of choice and selfishness. We can choose, and that's probably a different psychology than young people might have or other people might have in their lives. So again, something to continue to think about. Maybe the alarm and the time in history is something that we are going to see, this the particular demographic of who we are. In the film Dr. Zhivago, the characters in that film were living in a very difficult time, but they were still living their lives. They weren't living apart from history, but they were living parallel to history. And their life development and relationships manifest in ways that we're going to manifest irregardless of the historical time. I remember reading years ago about Dr. Zhivago that it was not allowed. They were not allowed to film it in Russia because Russia was the Soviet Union at the time. So instead, they had to film it in the fields, the rural fields of Spain. For many of us who've seen the film, I think probably embedded in our mind is the very quintessential vision of winter, of the frozen ice palace and the countryside covered in snow and the sleigh ride up to the frozen winter landscape. But oddly enough, it was filmed in Spain in the middle of summer, and the snow was created by spreading salt across the fields, and the home was encrusted in ice by spraying it with wax. I find those things so amusing because things are not always what they appear, yet they live in our minds as the very essence of something they simply are not. In my family life, we had some more fundamentalist holy roller types, spectrum of end of the family, who lived in Davenport, Iowa. And I remember hearing that they had said once that they don't see films because they believe that everything you see becomes a part of you. At Thanksgiving, my cousin corrected me and she said she was there. And the actual quote was, they believe that it's easier to forget or erase something from your mind if you've heard it or read it, but that if you've seen it, it's very difficult to erase from your mind. On the Saturday call, we talked about that briefly, and I think it was Jim said that everybody has a different way of learning. Some people learn through reading, some people learn through hearing, and some people are more visual. And probably whatever your aptitude leads you to, that's probably the most memorable. But I do think a picture and what you hear and read, they're all important. We need to be mindful of what we're bringing into our psyche because some of those things are hard to get rid of. Um, in my life, in the films that I don't see, because I don't really, actually, I don't see any popular or current films. I've seen many films in my lifetime, but I really don't have an interest in current culture. But my sister did drag me to a film this Thanksgiving. The film was called Amsterdam, and similar to Dr. Zhivago, I was especially intrigued by the review. In the review of Amsterdam, the film Amsterdam, they described it as a group of hapless people who were living in a very difficult time, but living their lives joyfully. And I was especially intrigued by that because I thought that's a very edifying message we can all embrace. I think we can see that we're living in a difficult time, our difficult time of history, but we can live our lives joyfully. We don't have to ignore history, but we can bring joy into this difficult time, doing what we need to do, accomplishing what we believe we need to do, but we can do it with joy. Part of the reason I was always so puzzled with the film Dr. Zhivago is because it just abruptly ends with a scene at a hydroelectric plant. And in my young mind, I thought, well, is that what this was all about? A revolution and killing people and disrupting people's lives just to accomplish a physical infrastructure structure? When Queen Elizabeth died, I was similarly intrigued because so much of the footage of her life and her duties showed her at the inauguration of bridges and highways and launching ships. It had so much to do with infrastructure. And I thought, well, is that what Queen Elizabeth was all about? She was simply there to glorify and to spiritualize infrastructure. Is that what we're trying to do? In the book of the Tarot, it mentions that those are two different routes we can take. We can materialize the spiritual or spiritualize matter. And I think with this undue emphasis on infrastructure, we're somehow trying to spiritualize matter when instead we're probably supposed to be materializing the spiritual. So infrastructure, we all like things, we all like nice roads and bridges and highways and buildings. That's all well and fine, but there are other things. The bridges and roads and buildings, there's probably akin to our small conscious selves, but the greater consciousness of infrastructure is the spiritual infrastructure. And that's the dream and imagination and love. And we need to be mindful of those structures and bring those structures increasingly into the world and manifest those in all the different ways that we can. Um, Also on the call, near the end of the call, as we were trying to figure out, what what is the natural conclusion of this uneven and hard to follow narrative. I do believe it was Tim Downs again, who brought up the idea that it's all about divinity. We we need to realize that and have an awareness and understanding and an acceptance that we are the prodigy of divinity. And similar to the people, the characters in Amsterdam, if you can truly lean into the idea that you are the prodigy of divinity in any bad time, you can probably very easily manifest joy. I don't want to in any way discount the time and place that we are in history. I have anecdotal information from friends who just this week returned from Europe, Argentina, and Brazil. And talking to people outside of our country, people outside of our United States, looking at the United States, are viewing the situation here with alarm. There is real concern about what's going on here in the United States. So I don't want to dismiss that in any way, but we need to look beyond the material and figure out how to pick up the threads of battle and hear the alarm in a way that is joyful, loving. And whenever we can, we need to fight for kindness. We will be continuing our conversation about who we are, where we are, who we are individually, what's our role, what's our script, and where we're going together, how we can navigate our way out of this more challenging part of the dream. Every dream has a happy and joyful part, and every dream has a more challenging part. But how can we bring the joy into all the parts of our lives, all the all the parts of our dream, and all the parts of our imagination? This doesn't need to be fringe, and it doesn't need to be a conspiracy. The Saturday Illinois Bridging Awareness Call is every Saturday at 9 a.m. Central Time on Zoom. I will include my email in the description of this video. I'll be happy to send you an invitation, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.